Anthony, I want to start at the beginning. You got your start all the way 1996 working as a technician at Sega GameWorks, and not long after you joined Dave and Buster's, where you spent like over 21 years. That's a full career in operations.
It was a long
Yeah.
time. What really got me involved in in this industry is, I play guitar. So when I was younger, sometimes my guitar equipment would fail, and I wouldn't know why. But my stepdad got me into electronics, so he taught me how to solder and taught me about the different components. So I ended up repairing my own guitar stuff. And by the time I got my way around to GameWorks, made my way into the tech staff there. Just used those skills to help me along, and I did well enough for myself that eventually moved on over to Dave and Buster's, where that career went. It flourished even more. So I was grateful for the opportunity. Worked with a lot of great people there, but I got to be able to train and teach a lot of techs. That knowledge that I had acquired to be able to repair games. And yeah, that career there was very, very much a learning experience. I learned so much from that, just being in the operation, from everything from training and development to, P&Ls to game room layouts, still learning a lot of repair and different machines that would come through. So there was definitely a lot to absorb.
Over these 2 decades, you moved through multiple roles and eventually became a senior amusement manager, overseeing game performance, layouts, and day-to-day operations across like high-volume locations. What changes when you stop looking at machines individually and then start looking at them as a system?
Well, you really could learn from where placement is. That is a part of it. Placement, game room layout, looking at flows of traffic through your game room, game spacing, lines of sight. There's a lot of different things. ADA compliance even comes into this as well, making sure that you have enough space for any disabled individuals, whether they're in a wheelchair or not, to be able to have an adequate space to get through, as well as even play the games. Having some lower games that are lower to the floor to be able to help the ADA compliance comes into play as well. When you first walk in a game room, all this stuff ties together because, what do you see? You see a lot of flashing lights, you see a lot of sounds, creates a lot of excitement in that atmosphere. So what you see first, kind of draws your attention. Usually you want to see an attraction of some sort in your game room. The way you place your games along the walls, the way you position them in islands throughout the room to be able to navigate the entire room and not just kind of if the games are lined up in a way where it kind of blocks some of the room, you may not know that space is there, so it may get less traffic. So then you'll see lower revenue on those pieces.
One thing you say that really resonates with me is this idea that machines aren't decorations, they are workers. Can you explain how you evaluate machines as employees instead of just products?
Sure. So when you look at the machines, of course, everyone sees a game. Oh, it's a game. We're going to play. We're going to have fun. But at the same time, that game is also a revenue source. You're taking in money. A lot of places are on card reader systems. There's different types of card reader systems. Some places, a few places, even still operate off cash or coins. I think a lot of places are moving to smaller, even routes are moving to credit card readers to be able to play the games. To kind of get back on track with your question, they're not just decorations. They don't just look pretty and make sounds. They are essentially a cash register. They're there to provide a certain level of entertainment for a certain period of time, but the money they take in, the revenue it generates, that's where it becomes a worker. So what's different about that is when you look at games and you look at game uptime, you want to make sure that you focus really hard on making sure that game is working as often as possible. Make sure that you do any type of preventative maintenance to make sure it stays working so it can continue to accept, that revenue. But any kind of downtime will impact that. So if your game is not being maintained, or if something's broken, or whether you have to order a part, that worker is no longer working. It's no longer supporting that revenue income or that revenue stream. So that's kind of the perception behind that.
Anthony, we met with your crew at IAPA, and this industry loves shiny new things, but hype doesn't really pay rent. And you said you don't chase trends, you chase sustainable performance. So when you evaluate a new game or attraction, what questions come first?
Well, looking at the gameplay, the game type, what type of game it is, if it's a ball game or if it's a shooting game or driving game, to make sure that you look at all aspects of the game to see how it's going to perform. I've been lucky enough to be around the machines long enough to kind of understand that you're always going to have a driving game, a shooting game, you're going to have ball games, redemption games in in any game room. So looking at that and seeing not only the type of game, but the theme of the game as well. I know there's a lot of games that have IPs now that really attract a lot of attention to support that. But I mean, that's kind of in the nutshell what I'm looking at.
Let me ask you, is there is always like best performers, some games that always is on a winning side?
I think when you look at the games, you kind of want to separate them to, let's say, video games or video. And then the next section would be redemption. So when you look at video, you're always going to have your performers like driving games, shooting games. Those are always really popular. But when you look at the redemption side, there's different types of redemption games, but that is a real big revenue driver because in any game room nowadays, your mix between a simulation game and a redemption game is going to be somewhere around 60-40, maybe 70-30. And that, it's going to be leaning towards that redemption piece. And a big driver for redemption is what prizes you have available. So if you're looking at that and you're saying, okay, I have let's say, take 60 mix for sake of argument. If you're going to have that, you want to make sure you focus on the prizes that you have in your redemption area. That is going to be a huge driver for people wanting to play those redemption games because everyone wants to win tickets, right? Like, hey, I want to win a bunch of tickets. I want to go in and I want to get a prize. Sometimes people have to save up a little bit depending on what they want, but having those high value prizes or having a good mix of prize between, low, mid, and high value can keep driving that for people wanting to play more. So if they go and they put $20 on their game card and they're, a few hundred tickets shy of the prize they want, they're more apt to go back and put more money on their game card to play again to win those tickets. So looking at it that way, as far as the game types, what really drives the revenue, primarily redemption side. That's going to be a huge piece.
Interesting. Okay, so redemption side is must. Okay. Now we also have arcade machines, virtual reality attractions. How are they perform compared to redemption games?
So virtual reality is kind of seen a bit of ebbs and flows, if you will. And I think some of that has to do with the durability of the hardware. That comes into play, but also when you look at different types of virtual reality. So you have free roam virtual reality based games, and then you have unattended virtual reality. So unattended VR definitely has gained a lot of popularity. Obviously, it saves you on that labor cost. You don't have to have someone scheduled there to operate it. Also saves you on footprint. It's a much smaller footprint than a free roam VR. So you're going to see a little bit better ROI on that side. But as far as VR is concerned, I think VR is still evolving and it's definitely, here to stay. It's here to stay.
What about arcade machines?
Oh, arcade machines. When you look at arcade, I remember as a kid, my stepdad would take me to arcade. It's a whole different environment, right? It's a little dark room, and the game's packed in there. You put your quarter up on the glass to wait for your turn, and look at how it's evolved now. And back then, there was no redemption. Back then, it was all video. When you look at the classic games like Defender and Pac-Man and even games like Tempest, those weren't giving out tickets, and yet they still were hugely popular. They're popular and they're a big driver for arcade. Those have evolved now to the games you see, in any arcade you walk into. Your drivers, your shooters, your ball games. It's evolved a little bit more with that redemption piece.
Between all of these different types of arcade machines and redemption games, what separates top performers from space wasters?
Some of that has to do with the game type, the popularity of the game. Is it easy to play? Is it easy to understand? That's going to drive a lot of people to want to play it. Again, like I mentioned before, IPs come into play with that as well. You have just like Marvel or Disney or anything like that. That's going to be a huge piece too, because people are going to be more attracted to that. That's that visual part. We talked earlier about, not just being a decoration. Those IPs tend to attract that attention. So it seems decorative, I guess, in one way you could say, but it's going to drive someone to that game to play it. Now, if they go to the game and it's difficult to understand and they have a hard time winning any tickets, it may not be as successful. So definitely games that are easy to play, easy to win. The settings come into play too, because you want to make sure that you're balanced out in how many tickets you're paying out versus how many plays you're getting in. But that's up to the operator to kind of dive into that. As long as the game is adjusted to a point where, you're going to have a balance, then that's going to be a factor in that as well, what makes a game successful. Because if it's too hard, if someone makes the settings too hard, people play it once and walk away, and they'll even tell other people, hey, you're not going to win anything there. Don't play that. So you want to avoid that by making sure your game settings are set appropriate as well.
So what is the price difference between, let's say, game with IP, highly recognized name, versus just normal game?
Well, The IP, you have a license along with that too. So there's extra costs associated with that. It could drive the price up depending on the IP. It can drive the price up to different levels. To go over each one would be a little bit difficult at this point in time because I don't have the data on every IP, but you can't expect a game with an IP to come with a little bit higher price tag because of those licensing.
Is it predetermined prices already, or you have to negotiate every time you're trying to buy a new game like this?
Typically, when you work with the manufacturer of the game, that's when the pricing comes into play. And sometimes there can be some negotiation involved with that. But again, it depends on game type, popularity, and if there's an IP on it that will, like I said, drive up those costs. But yes, typically you look at the manufacturer relationship, and manufacturer will set the price. And again, if it's a popular title, there may be some wiggle room in there, but it depends on how well it's selling, and that all ties into popularity. So and there's some games that are reliable as well. So you got to look at the cost of ownership as a huge piece of this as well. When you're dealing with a game that is constantly needs attention or maintenance, the amount of money you're putting in for repair, labor costs to repair that, or even uptime comes into play. That also can affect it. And that, regardless if it has an IP or not, can definitely affect any machine.
So let's pretend that I'm a new operator, just planning to get into the space. I have a limited square footage available and limited budget. Which category should I make a priority, and why?
If you're looking at adding a redemption counter, because that's an important piece when you're a new operator, you're getting your games ready for your room, even if you have limited space. If you're going to be running a redemption counter is one thing. A lot of times smaller game rooms will go without doing a redemption counter. And there's certain companies that make machines where you can redeem your tickets at a machine. It opens like a locker and you can win your prize, to kind of help offset the costs, but still have that prize available. I would say redemption would be a piece that you need to heavily consider if you're looking at it, even for a small game room. Having some redemption pieces to not only help drive that the revenue, drive the income, but also to keep people coming back. Because if you have a game nowadays, it's a little bit different. If you have a game room with just simply video games in it, it's not quite the same as having that redemption piece attached to it. Mm-hmm. There's going to be people that are coming back, but one of the things that I didn't mention before that comes into that as well is cycling out your games in your game room. Every year, at least, you should be looking at replacing some of the games, looking at your top 10 games, top 10 earners, or your bottom 10 earners to see, hey, which bottom 10 earners should I replace? A lot of mistakes are made where everyone puts the same games in and they expect it to perform over the next 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years. As new product comes out, they're not refreshing their game room. Their revenues typically start to decline.
Interesting. And I heard that the good rule of thumb is the game should pay back. Like if it pays back in 6 months, it's perfect. If less, then it's kind of slow earner. Is that still correct?
Yeah, there is some of that that comes into play. When you're looking at your ROI, you definitely want to see that ROI within 6 to 10 months. And that doesn't mean that it's bad if it doesn't earn it back in that time. It may take a little bit longer, but a lot of people now, there's the instant gratification that everyone wants, right? They want to buy a game, they want the newest one, they want it now, and they want to see the ROI now. So sometimes that is affected by your maintenance on the game. Preventative maintenance, how well you're maintaining it, how well is the game performed, does it require more maintenance than other games? So there's a lot of factors to look at when you're looking at ROI. You can plug a new game in and sure, it may not have an issue for a couple of months, but if you're not opening up to make sure that the dust is cleared out and there's nothing that you can catch, like a wire that looks like it's starting to fray from movement or something, that's going to cause you problems later on that you're going to look at on a volume day, and it's going to go down and like, oh no, I just lost $1,000 or $2,000 or $3,000 depending on the game. So preventative maintenance definitely is a huge factor. I think not enough people are kind of understanding that needs to get done, and that comes in tough too from an operational perspective. When you look at labor, I had that challenge for years, managing labor, and the business is slow, or it's a slow period of the year, but the games are sitting there powered on for, 12, 15, 16 hours a day, depending on the hours of operation. Even though there's nobody playing them, the games are still moving. They're still generating heat. The moving parts are still moving. That preventative maintenance still needs to be a factor in that, because when business starts to increase, and if you haven't done that preventative maintenance, now your games are probably going to break more often. And now you have a different problem you got to tackle. There's different things and a lot of different things involved when it comes from an operational standpoint, not just looking at the nice shiny new game that's there. So there's a lot to stay on top of.
Anthony, so you worked with very successful operators, and you've also seen owners who opened, struggled, and eventually closed. From your perspective, do you see the clear pattern?
Location is important. I'm looking at what other type of, FECs, family entertainment centers, or any type of entertainment are within your geographical location. Because if you're going to open a location near competition, that's obviously going to be pretty tough depending on what you're offering. You could offer different types of entertainment from the competition, but I think a lot of times from what I've seen is just how well the operation performs, the level of service, the level of maintenance on the games, the level of maintenance in the facility. That comes into play. People notice the little things, with the cleanliness, whether it's from the restrooms or right in the front door, greeting, just the level of guest service, greeting people as they come in, greeting people on the floor. All those little things play a huge factor in a location being successful. So there's location geographically, your level of service, how well you run your operation, the experience of your team, making sure your team's being coached and developed, setting those expectations. I could go on and on. There's a lot to stay on top of in any operation, whether it's small or large. And if those things aren't being paid attention to, that's where things start to kind of go downhill.
Location-wise, you're talking about rural area compared to busy city. Have you seen very successful operators in rural areas?
I don't have anything I can recall to be able to really speak heavily on that. But again, when you're in a rural area, it depends on what kind of entertainment you're offering. If you have just a game room by itself, that may not be enough to drive in the business. If someone has to drive 45 minutes to an hour to come to your location,
yes,
and you don't have the right offerings, they may only come once, maybe twice.
Mm-hmm.
And then that creates an opportunity for you as a business owner to say, okay, well, what can I change? What can I do? And then now you need to look at, obviously, the cost and, getting some funding to add different things. But if you look at the flip side and you have a location in a rural area that has something like maybe mini golf, go-karts, even batting cages, then you have also food involved in that. And then you have the game room, and you look at your game room, depending on your games with your mix of games, your video and redemption. That's going to attract a lot more attention, and get more repeat business. People are going to want to come. You can then now do events, birthday parties there. So it drives in a whole new revenue with that as well when you do events. So it really just varies on what your offerings are, how far away your nearest competition is offering the same offerings as you, and how will you maintain it?
I love this. And that makes so much sense because you're right. In rural areas, a lot of people drive long distances to get to you. And if you have limited offering, it's so much harder to convince them to come back again. And if you have multiple experiences, then it's a completely different story. Plus, if you have food, absolutely, that makes so much sense.
One
Yes.
thing too that you need to look at with that too is how long they're there. Like how long does your average guest spend in your facility? Are they only there for 30 minutes, or are they there for 45 minutes to an hour and a half? What is keeping them there? Again, your level of guest service is a huge part of that. The types of games you have is a huge part of that. The maintenance you provide into everything. I mean, you can drill this down to a lot of different detailed pieces, but all that has to work like a machine. As long as all the machines and parts of the machines are tightened and lubricated, and make sure there's nothing wearing, so to speak, you're going to run a lot smoother. It's a lot easier to maintain that than it is to repair it if it's broken somewhere.
When do you think, how many machines do I need to have in order to justify to have a dedicated person, like tech person, working? Besides, if you don't want to do it yourself. And I don't know, in the industry, how many operators actually fix themselves versus outsource versus having somebody full-time?
There's some that fix them themselves. That would depend on obviously the size of the building, the amount of games you have in there, and how well you can stay on top of it doing it on your own. I would probably say that, if you have anywhere between, 20, 30 games, you may want to consider having someone else on there to help you maintain the game room. That would also depend on the age of the games. Your older games are probably going to have need to be touched a little bit more often. And that's not always the case, but for the most part, as the games age, they're probably going to need a little more attention, whether it's even a decal, light bulb, any kind of moving parts comes into play with that. So it just depends on the mix of games you have. You have a lot of games with moving parts, a lot of games that would require, if there's a lot of buttons or switches, kids like to come over and smack the buttons, right? So sometimes they break, they fail, the switch fails. So there's a lot of little things to pay attention to in a game room. That's one of the things that I was happy and really helped me out a lot, is that attention to detail with the games, from lights to switches to decals. All of it makes a difference, especially when it comes to the moving part side. To get back to your question, I think anybody can kind of look and see that, probably, like I said, 20 to 30 games, you may want to have someone there. You can do it on your own. Is it possible? Sure. If you're generating the revenue and you can afford that labor, it would be best to add that labor in, because you can operate that game room with a preventative maintenance program on top of that. So in your slower periods, you're doing those preventative maintenance points on all the games to help support those busier times.
We spoke about rural areas, small cities. Let's talk about big cities, busy locations. What is your suggestion as far as what minimum square footage should it be, and how big it can go from there?
Well, you could put a lot into a small area if you put the right pieces in. So that comes into play. As far as a minimum area in a big city, I'm sure you got to look at rent as well, or leasing costs. So that's going to come into play. I don't know if I could tell you an exact number as far as a square footage area, because that varies. And especially today's games that we have on the market, most of them are pretty large. They're on the larger sides. If you have a small area, you're going to have to stick to smaller games, smaller footprint games. And that's going to obviously affect your revenue. The bigger games tend to be a little bit flashier, attract that attention. Those are more of your attraction pieces that draw those people to the game. But you also want to have those smaller games as well around it that you can have people play while they're waiting to play that attraction, so they have something readily available to play. But if you're looking at some place, like I said, a small square footage would be very tough to kind of operate. I would say it would be very careful on which games you select if you do have a small space to work with.
And when you're saying small, what's considered small?
Well, again, trying to figure out what if I could give you a number here, because most of the
you don't have to go square footage wise, but maybe machine wise. Like how many machines considered small?
Oh, okay, maybe like 5 to 10.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times you have route locations that that have just a few games. It might be a bar or a small storefront, and they may have 2 or 3 games, and that's great. That's something to attract people to their storefront, or something for people to do when they're in the bars. But again, having the right games there. Crane games are pretty popular. Having your little plush prizes or keychains or whatnot inside a crane game definitely is passing the time. But is that the right game to have for your operation? Knowing your demographic, being in tune with the type of foot traffic you're getting into your business. If you're only going to operate a few games, it's pretty important. Then you look at IP product as well. Anything that's like say Pokemon, for example. Anything Pokemon is just, everyone flocks to it. It flies off the shelves. So having a crane game with that type of licensed product in will definitely draw people in, and it'll definitely generate more money. Other part of that too is if it's a rev share. Sometimes these storefronts will do a rev share program where that way they don't have to touch it if something happens. And that comes with both its pros and cons as well. It's great because you don't have to touch the game, you don't have to repair it if something breaks, and you get a portion of the revenue. But on the flip side, you're only getting a portion of the revenue, and now you have to call someone to maintain that game. And if they don't get out there quickly to fix it, again, when we're talking about game uptime, that comes into play. So now your game's not working. So now you're not generating any money from it. So like I said, there's pros and cons. It's looking at your business, trying to find out what game would work best for your operation. Is it a video game? Is it a crane game? That would definitely come into play. And I would kind of work with anybody that has interest in that to help guide them on what would be the best piece to put in there.
Anthony, for somebody who's just starting up, I heard that it might be not a bad idea to do revenue share because A, you need less money upfront. B, you don't have most likely experience fixing stuff, so they take care of that. And C, and this might be most important for me if I would start something like this, they know what games perform, and usually they tend to install this kind of games because again, they have direct interest for your facility to generate more. Is that correct? Or there is some partners like who do in revenue share who would install like bad machines just to get rid of them? It doesn't make sense for them, right, to do that?
No, I wouldn't say that games, for the most part, I wouldn't say that that would be the case where someone would want to put a bad game in there just because they want to get rid of them. That's not going to support anything. The location you're going to put that bad game into is going to find out really quickly it's not performing, and they're going to want to get rid of it. So that would be a big factor in understanding which games to put in there. If you're going through an operator, usually they're pretty good about putting the right pieces in there. But I can't speak for everybody. But and anyone that I speak with, I definitely try to guide them in the right direction. Getting to know them, understanding their operation, understanding what they're trying to achieve. That way we can get the right piece in there.
Mm-hmm. So if you want to boil it down, so what's the real difference between building a profitable, sustainable amusement business and owning a location that's just constantly fighting just to survive?
Well, I think that when you look at a larger operation, if you have the funding available to really have something on the larger side, factoring in the labor you need and going over, dotting all your I's and crossing all your T's to make sure that you have everything covered would be beneficial, obviously, to be successful, right? But somebody that has a smaller location or doesn't really know what they're doing, there are companies and people out there that do consultations to kind of help guide them. And that's something that we provide to customers as well, is helping to guide the right pieces of our product that'll work best for them.
Anthony, let's talk about Amusement Source International. From an operator's perspective, what makes you different from other distributors?
Well, what makes us different is the pieces that we have, the games that we have are somewhat unique because they're different than what you see in most arcades. And one of the biggest things that I've noticed, and you can go to 10 different arcades, and in all 10 arcades, you'll see probably the same, 10 games in there. You can walk in, we don't even have to point those out. You'll see the same product. So when you're looking at putting product in your location, you want to have that variety. And what makes us different is we have that variety of games, but also we have a high level of service. We pride ourselves on, answering the phone, responding to email, making sure that we're here to support you in your business. And that is something that Corey is very huge on. And I buy into that 100%. Because if you're not there to help support when there's a problem, then you could you're at a loss when people start to learn real quick that you're not going to be there, and that's not going to support the sales part of it.
Now, when you're talking about support after sale, what it includes?
Support after the sale. So we have our own technical team. So if there's any kind of troubleshooting or parts that need to be ordered, that team can be reached so we can provide that level of support. And there's a lot of times when some of my customers will give me a call before they call our tech department, just because I'm the point of contact as the initial person they spoke with. And then because of my experience, I can kind of guide them on initial troubleshooting before I hand them over to our technical department to be able to pick up the rest if that's even needed. So that level of service that we provide, as well as that after sale service, like you mentioned, is a huge part to what we do. You have to, I think, if any business isn't providing that high level of after sale service, it's a detriment to what they're doing, because people are going to have frustrations with your product. And that's exactly what you don't want. You want to break down that barrier so you can not only support the product they have, but also open the door when it's time to do a refresh and they want to get more of our product. And they know that we stand behind our product, and they know we're here to support. We're not going anywhere. And it makes that level of comfort to say, yeah, I want more of their pieces, because they provide the best service, and we know we can see they're going to get more product in. We can do a refresh, or we can add more games in later on.
Nice. Okay, gotcha. So where is your warehouse? Where are you physically located?
It's in Carrollton, Texas.
Okay. And you produce machines, though, in China. You just import it in Texas, and then you do distribution from there?
Right. We work with our manufacturing partners overseas, and we ship the games over, and we have a warehouse there, and we have a showroom there as well. We have a great showroom that we have not all of the pieces that we have available to purchase, but a good portion of them are set up in our showroom. So you can come down, you can look at the games, play the games, and we can tell you, hey, for what you're trying to do, these games would work best for your scenario or your situation. Anytime we get a new piece, we definitely put it up in the showroom so everyone can check it out.
From your experience, for somebody new who is just thinking about getting into the industry, let's say that they want to start on a smaller size, maybe with 10 machines. What cost are we talking about, plus or minus, like for those 10 machines?
That's a tough question, because if you're looking at 10 machines, if you're looking at a VR game in there, that's going to be a larger chunk of costs. So really, I would say it'd be better to focus on the budget you have than.
Okay, so yeah, and this is where I'm kind of trying to lead. I don't know much about the industry. So if I were somebody who is looking to start a new business and I have limited square footage, what should I expect to spend just on a minimal side?
Again, a tough question because just because a game is small doesn't necessarily mean it's less expensive sometimes. So I did work with a customer recently who was looking to get 3 different pieces, and they were trying to decide which ones they wanted to place. And it wasn't a FEC or an arcade. It was I believe it's a school, like a technical school. And they're asking questions because they wanted a crane game. And what they wanted to do is they wanted to put fishing lures in this crane game, and they wanted it to be set to a winner every time. So they didn't go into detail on what kind of promotion they were doing or if it was with their students or not. But I worked with them to be able to select the right crane game and make sure and get their questions answered on, the size claw it needed versus what they were going to pick up, what the prizes they wanted. Then they also wanted to get another game. They wanted a couple different types of games. So I work with them in the same respect to figure out, hey, which games are going to work for you based off what they're looking for. So for 3 games that they wanted to place, they were looking probably around, if I remember correctly, about 15 grand, 10 to 15 grand.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it just depends on the game type, the popularity, the cost of the game comes into play with those factors.
Gotcha.
These days, unfortunately, it's not necessarily inexpensive to bring on any games. So pricing is definitely something we look at when we price our games. We price our games very competitively, and plus we have unique games as well. So it's going to be different than the competition down the street. So we definitely work hard to make sure we offer the right price point for the games. We don't overinflate the price. We make sure that we work with our manufacturing partners to set the right pricing for it to make sure we bring the best value to our customers.
Do you also offer a revenue share model?
No, unfortunately, we don't do rev share. We just do direct sales. So we work through different distributors as well. There are some customers we have that we do direct sales with.
And what about financing? Do you offer any financing or?
Not directly through us, but we do have a few partners that we work with for financing. So if someone needs some financing for their product, we got at least a handful of different partners we work with to be able to help get them financed.
Okay. And then maintenance. Is there like maintenance agreement attached to any new purchase?
Currently, we do not offer any type of a maintenance agreement, but we do have our support department there to be able to call or email to get that support they need. All of our machines have a 1-year warranty that covers all major parts. The wear and tear is typically not included, So 1-year warranty and all the major parts in your game. We have our tech department that you can reach out to for support, questions, parts as well. So as far as the maintenance package, we don't offer any type of packages with that, but the level of support we provide is our technical staff, along with our 1-year warranty.
You see economy shifting. What do you feel happening right now in 2026 and beyond?
So I think that's a great question because we recently seen last year with the tariffs that were put into place, and that caused, I think, a lot of people to pump the brakes. So last year sales seemed to be soft across the board. I think that was a huge part of it. I think, with the president in his first year, I think a lot of people were also waiting to see what was going to happen. Coming out of that first year, we're looking at a little bit different scenario. People are starting to buy more product now, especially coming out of IAAPA. They've seen, all the product that was displayed there, and we had tons of new product on our booth. So that's also going to help drive sales for us as well. The types of different products that we have, we've definitely looked very closely at what we're bringing in. And working with our manufacturing partners, we're able to bring in some really attractive games that are going to help drive sales. But as far as the economy going right now, I kind of see a shift in that because the tariff thing still hasn't been squashed yet, but still working through it. But I think looking at the economy, prices of just between gas and groceries, it fluctuates a little bit across the US, but I think it's going in a positive direction. So that's going to help support these operations to be able to feel more comfortable spending money on replacing older pieces or adding new pieces, or even opening new locations. And from what I've seen, there's quite a bit of locations that are brand new, that's starting up. And it's great to see that competition, definitely the variety of having different, locations. There's a lot of like clawcades that are coming up now where they're just all claw machines, right?
I saw it. Yes, I actually had an interview on a podcast with one of the operators who just opened, one of the claw machine operators. It's interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot of great product. We have a machine from Dream Funds that has a display up top, and you can link all the claws together. There's a lot of this coming out now, so you can put up banners for events or advertising, and they have mini games in there. So it adds another element to the claw game. It's not just about winning the prize. It actually has a mini game in there as well that can be played from time to time. But yeah, clawcades are definitely up and coming.
Nice. If you could give one piece of advice to an operator making decisions in 2026, what should they focus on first?
If the operator is looking at their specific operation and what they're doing, I would definitely say look at your game room. Make sure you keep your games well maintained. However, you're able to do that within your budget, but that's going to save you a lot in the long run. Making sure your staff is trained, the expectation levels are set, and they understand how to repair the games, being able to teach them that if that's needed. But looking at the care and feeding of all of your machines in your game room is probably the biggest advice I would give somebody. That would change depending on what their scenario was, but when you're looking at just an arcade, the care and feeding of your machines should be number one.
Anthony, this was a fantastic conversation. Your operator first mindset cuts through so much noise in the industry. For anyone listening who wants to learn more about Amusement Source International, what's the website or where can they find more information?
AmusementSourceInternational.com.
Beautiful. Yeah, and I'm going to put a link in the description, so make sure to check it out there. And thank you for joining us today. Thank you for listening and supporting. Make sure to comment, share, and if you want to be featured on the podcast, make sure to visit attractionsinsights.com and submit application to be featured. And we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you, Dmitry. Thank you for having me.